Today we are talking about Windows Phone 7 and integration, which we make possible between Windows Phone 7 and various backends, including Java.NET and PHP, and all kinds of different services that we provide for integration purposes. If you guys have any questions as I go, please feel free to throw them in there. I'll be periodically checking if there are any questions. And then at the end of the webinar, we're going to have one Q&A session as well. All right, so let's get started. And I guess one of the first questions that I'd like to address is why WebORB with Windows Phone 7? Well, if you are familiar with Windows Phone 7, and I'm sure most of you are, you will know that it's definitely possible to integrate Windows Phone 7 with backend. It doesn't really preclude from being able to fetch data from the server or make SOAP invocations. But I believe when you build modern enterprise or really any consumer applications, I think it's very important to have solid infrastructure and framework for dealing with server-side services or communicating with other clients or communicating from client to server and vice versa. So as far as WebORB, the position that we are taking as far as positioning our product really spins around the idea of universal mobile connectivity. And the idea is that as the number of devices and the number of different mobile platforms is growing, right now there are three major ones, which is Android, iOS, and Windows Phone. I believe that it's going to happen that various application developers will be targeting different platforms, because isolating your application to one doesn't really make sense, because you would want to capture as wide audience as possible. So that said, if you have your application developed for different platforms, somehow that application needs to communicate with each other. It needs to communicate with a server. And well, the server needs to be able to push data back to the clients. So that's kind of one of the core principles of universal mobile connectivity, where if you were to develop the same application for different platforms, you would want to have the same backend, whether it's .NET or whether it is Java, and you would want to expose that backend, whether those are services or messaging streams, in the same universal way. And that's what we provide. So we provide native APIs for various mobile environments that allow you to connect exactly the same way, using exactly the same API from the client environment, from your client application, to the server. Okay, so and then Windows Phone 7 is definitely one of the platforms, one of the environments which we target in our development, as I will demonstrate today. Now, exactly the same API which we provide for Windows Phone 7 can be used to communicate between WP7 device to Java, .NET, and PHP. And on the server side, you could have a variety of different services. So if it is Java, you could have plain Java objects. You could have EJBs. You could have Spring Beans. If it is .NET, it could be just plain .NET class, or WCF, or Spring.NET Bean. And all of those are supported, and supported in the same way, where the client-side API stays exactly the same no matter what the backend service is. Now, and that's the first bullet, basically, WP7 to server. The second bullet that you see here, server to WP7, really addresses the fact that we provide an infrastructure that would allow you to make invocations of the client-side code directly from the server code, whether it is Java or .NET on the server. So we make it very easy to invoke those C# or whatever you use to write your WP application methods directly from Java or from .NET. So that's the server to WP7 bullet. Now, we'll also provide infrastructure where your WP7 application can very easily and very efficiently communicate with either the same or other applications running elsewhere on other types of devices. So if you're building a chat client, for instance, that has presence on, let's say, iPhone and WP7, then we provide the APIs that let you do that. And then as far as any business logic that you might want to put on the server, it could be either in Java or .NET. And finally, WP7 to clients. So here I separated, phone clients from just traditional clients, and the traditional clients, which is the fourth bullet that you see here, really any kind of traditional desktop or browser-based applications that you have. So if you're building an application that spans the boundary of the phone to the browser, and we provide the APIs and infrastructure where those instances of applications can also communicate. So your let's say desktop WPF app or a JavaScript app really can exchange data between your WP7 application and whatever's running in the browser. So that's kind of the core value that we provide as far as it concerns WP7 environment. All right. So as far as specifically remoting, I did mention that a wide variety of different services is supported. Now, if you, I assume most of the people integrate Windows Phone 7 with .NET backend, and the integration is through WCF. In my experience, well, it definitely works. However, the effort that it takes to really provide that integration, I believe it is fairly cumbersome. By comparison and contrast, the APIs which we provide, which I will demonstrate today, I think are a lot more intuitive and also provide superior performance for the reason that the actual on-the-wire protocol, it is still HTTP, but we support highly compressed and optimized data stream that encodes information about the invocations. But it's not limited to WCF only, so you could just easily create your, let's say if it is .NET, just plain .NET classes and in .NET class libraries, deploy them on the server, and they immediately become remoting services which can be accessed directly from Windows Phone 7 device. But really anything else or everything else that you see here in this list can be targeted from Windows Phone 7 application, and you can invoke those back-end services through WebORB on any of these component types that you see here. All right. So as far as messaging is also a very, very important part from our perspective. So we really split the integration into remoting, which is just traditional RPC, where you can create a client-side proxy and just start invoking backend methods, and also messaging. So as far as messaging, there are two different things which we provide for messaging. So one is the publish-subscribe messaging, where your WP7 client can start sending messages to queues and topics hosted on the server through our gateway, and thus integrate it with various message queuing systems, including JMS, NMS, ActiveMQ, MSMQ, really everything that has standard kind of MQ interface. But you don't have to go this route because we provide our internal message queuing mechanism as well. So you don't need to couple with any of these. But if your server-side application includes these and depends on them, then you can definitely do that. Now, as far as the publish-subscribe messaging, it's bidirectional. So your WP7 app can be both producer, meaning it can publish messages, and it can also be a consumer to subscribe to receive messages. And since we support a wide variety of different devices and client-side environments, then you can create an application where messages can be published from really anywhere, either from the server or from any other client, including JavaScript, Flex, Flash, Silverlight, doesn't really matter. And your WP7 will receive all those messages. And that's one of the demos that I have here as well. Now, another one, which you see the second major bullet, RTMP support. RTMP protocol really comes from the Flash environment. And for many years, it was restricted to Flash. We do have an implementation of that protocol in our .NET and Java servers, and I believe it provides tremendous value for application developers. So for instance, being able to invoke client-side functions directly from your server side, that's something that the RTMP makes possible. On top of this, remote shared object is something that most of .NET developers are not familiar with, but if you come from a Flash background, you know that it's a very powerful thing. And I'll delve into this a little bit deeper, just so you understand what remote shared objects are and how RTMP works. But this is really the core value add that we provide on the messaging side. Okay, and finally, we also have a fairly significant and really cool implementation that makes it easier to really get started and facilitate your development, including code generators for basic remoting, code generators for messaging, and monitoring tools that can show you, what's going on through those message queues and topics, regardless whether they are ActiveMQ, NMS, JMS, and so on. Okay, and then once again, I will demonstrate that code generation today as well. All right, so let's talk about the APIs, and I'll just use this PowerPoint as the guideline, but most of the time I'll be spending in either Visual Studio or elsewhere, and really focusing on the code. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about remoting, because it's kind of fairly basic, and that's the majority of the use cases that I know people are running into. So as far as remoting, the dependencies that you have to introduce are minimal. There is just one assembly which we provide specifically for Windows Phone 7 environment, and it is called WebORB client.dll. Once you include that assembly into your project, then you can start leveraging all of the APIs which we provide, including the remoting API. So as far as the remoting is concerned, the pattern for invocations is very, very simple. Really, you create an instance of the WebORB client class, as you can see in the sample code, and then you use the invoke function where you specify the name of the service, identify the method name, pass in an array of arguments, and the responder object. And the responder object is the one which will receive the actual response back from the server invocation, or will receive an exception if the server side threw an exception, or if any kind of error has occurred. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So, but the cool thing is that the first argument right here, the service name, can be absolutely anything that our product can expose as a service. So if it is, let's say, a .NET class, then you specify a fully qualified type name, including the namespace and the actual class. If it is a WSDL URL, so let's say if you want to expose a web service, then you just put the WSDL URL where the service name is expected. Okay. If it is a Spring bean or a Spring.NET bean, then you just put the ID of that bean, and then WebORB will locate the service and just will handle the invocation for you. Okay. So here, here's a list of all kinds of different things that you can identify with the service name. Okay. Now, on top of this, to get started, you can either start writing this code by hand, or you can rely on our code generator, which will make it easier for you and will generate not only the client-side code to handle the invocation, but all of the dependent complex types. So let's say if you have a Java class that you expose as a service through WebORB, then using the code generator, it will very quickly generate a Visual Studio project for you that will include all of the classes which participate in the client-server exchanges based on the methods which are exposed in that service. Okay, so let me switch to my WebORB for Java. I'll demonstrate how this WP7 integration works with WebORB for Java. And meanwhile, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to write them up there. Okay, so here is my Windows virtual machine, and I'm going to start an instance of WebORB for Java. Now, by the way, I do have my Windows phone right here, and this is a live video, so whenever we're going to be deploying, I'll be deploying it directly to the phone for the reason that this virtual machine, once the Windows Phone emulator starts up, is just becoming very, very slow and sluggish. So here I have started my WebORB for Java, and I'm just going to go to the management console for that instance. For now. All right, so here's the management console, and when I switch to services, I can see a list of all the deployed services. Specifically, let's say in Web and Flip, there's going to be a list of the jar files. If you work with WebORB for .NET, you will have exactly the same experience, but all of the deployed services will be in the .NET domain. So here I'm going to just dig into this WebORB.jar located service for which I want to generate code, and just demonstrate how the code generation works.